It's Friday night, and you have just had an amazing dinner at your favorite local hangout. You are feeling celebratory, so you decide to order that dessert you've had your eye on throughout the meal. It is decadent, it is buttery, it is caramely, it's sweet, it's divine. Every single bite is better than the last. You could not imagine a more perfect experience. So you grab your glass of red wine that you had with dinner, big, bold, packed with a punch red, with its oaky, cedary nuances, and it's dry as a bone tannins. And you take a magical sip and bam! Oh, gross. Yuck. The wine that was once delicious with your meal, it's now like chewing the bark off a tree, and not that luscious liquid you loved just a few minutes ago. So what the heck just happened? If you've ever had this experience or one similar to it, trust me, the wine that you loved did not all of a sudden go mysteriously bad. It just had a horrible reaction with the main component of your dessert, sweet, lovely sugar. And in today's episode, Richard King is back with me to break down sugar and wine interactions and to turn the tables on how many of you may perceive sweet wines. You are in for a delicious treat, so stay tuned. Welcome to Everyday Sommelier, where we make learning about wine approachable, fun, and something you can actually enjoy. I'm your host, Kristi Mayfield. Think of me as your sommelier next door, here to help you cut through the complexity so you can enjoy every glass with confidence and learn wine your way. I'm guilty, fantastically guilty, of drinking my dessert. While I love a delicious sweet cake or a tart, pie, even a cookie, I'm even more a fan of lusciously sweet dessert wines. The good news is they compare perfectly with that sweet concoction that we so love at the end of a meal, whether on a Tuesday night or for a big celebration. But here's the thing. There are a few tips and tricks to creating the perfect pairing when it comes to sweet foods and sweet wines. And I could not think of a better person than Richard to share with you how to create your own magical moments with both. Well, we are back with Richard King from Ellerby and leveraging not only the fact that he has such a tremendous experience as a sommelier in the DFW area, but he and I share a passion for sweet wines. And I think the thing that shocks me the most is sometimes I get this visceral, almost hatred from people around, I hate sweet wines. And I think that it's not necessarily, they really do hate sweet wines, but it's misunderstood because they probably either had the wrong sweet wine or they've had it with the wrong things. And so today we are going to really dive in pairing sweet wines with the right types of foods, because sugar is actually hidden in so many things that we eat without us even knowing. Yep. From sauces to, well, obviously there's desserts, but, sauces and glazes and even different cuisines, such as Asian cuisine, can have a lot of sugar in them and we just don't know it. So we are going to talk about what goes wrong, but we're also going to veer towards what to do to make it right. Sure. Because my goal today is for you to walk away from this episode as a true fan and an explorer of sweet wines. Yeah. So Richard, what are some of the most common problems when you are talking to your customers about dessert wines, whether it's misperceptions, whether it's failed food and wine pairings? I mean, what are some of the big problems that you're trying to overcome when you're introducing sweet or dessert wines into a pairing?
Well, I try to make it relative. I think a lot of times we forget when we were younger what we drank. And so I just, let's all be honest. When we were younger, we weren't drinking fine and rare white and reds, our very polished white and red wines. At least I wasn't. Let's put it that way. I was drinking Moscato d'Asti. I mean, it started out drinking
Boone's Farm strawberry.
Boone's Farm. Hey, listen, it's what it is, right? And one, we start out, usually drinking and eating foods that are sweeter because they're just a little bit, it's more comfortable for us, for our palates to here in the U.S. to get into things in the beginning and on the sweeter presence. And then as we grow older, our palates get more refined. We pull the sweetness out of what we eat and drink. And so as I've grown older, I love sweet wines, but it's a different kind of sweet wine.
Great point.
and I love sweet foods, but different kind of sweet foods. I'm not eating candy as much as I used to as a kid. I'm going the sweet mean more the glazes and things like that. Things like that. So wine's the same way. I love sweet wine, but I like a different sweet wine than I did 30 years ago. Now, wines that are sweet on purpose, that are made on purpose, that have a vision to go with food, those are the wines we're kind of drinking now.
So that brings an interesting segue question to the fact that as your palate matures, a lot of us have moved away, and our listeners' palates might have moved away from those sweeter wines into drier styles. We have a tendency when we go out to dinner, we order our appetizer, our salad, and our entree and our dessert, but we may stick with that same bottle of wine through the whole thing. So we may have like that drier Merlot or Bordeaux blend or Pinot Noir, or even a dry Chardonnay or Riesling. And then we're trying to pair that with our key lime pie or our chocolate torte, which can bring a whole different negative experience.
For sure.
And we think about that as kind of a negative against the wine.
Yep.
So what's happening there?
When I go to guests at the tables, a lot of times, I'll ask them, what are you drinking at home? So I can kind of get an idea what your palate is like, right?
Yeah.
And also kind of an idea what you want to spend on per bottle, right? It's always a safe way to go and ask. And I would say a majority, over half the time, people are giving me pretty big and bold and very fruit forward red wines that have a sweetness to them just because of how they're made or where they're made. These are red wines that don't have sugar added to them, but they just are naturally
fruit forward,
very fruit forward, that has perceived a higher sugar content. Okay. So then I know then that wine will only go as only a couple of dishes. So are you willing to go a little bit on the wines of that outside your box a little bit, or trust your server or a somm or the chef to make sure that red wine is going to pair better with those dishes than what you drink at home? I'm trying to get an idea what you're drinking at home because I want to see where you are, if you're palate wise. But then my job is to make sure that the two go together. So if I give you what you want at home and then I'll let you order what you want at the table, we're probably going to miss the mark for my job. The chef missed their job, the somm missed their job, but you missed your job also letting us guide you too. So if you are wanting a good experience either at your house or at a restaurant, let the experts, if you don't know how, right?
Yeah,
let the experts guide you of like, okay, I get it. We want to do big reds, but let's go to a red that is going to go well with that dish. Now, you might have a dish that has some natural sweetness to it already, so I'm going to pick a red that has some good sweetness to it as well. I just think, back to the question about the perceived of the sweet wines is we go back to that sweet, that blue bottle Riesling. Well, yeah, but we've all had it. I've had a ton of it in my life. I don't drink it much anymore, but I'm not drinking that anymore. I'm drinking other Rieslings that are may have just as much sugar, but now the acid, which we talked in the previous episode, the acid is coming up in the wine, so it has more of that balance on those wines.
Exactly. And so to that point, if you as a listener or a guest wants that, say, big bold red with your entree, how does that translate then, and what experience can that create if you're continuing to drink that though into your dessert course where you're going to have a sweet dish in front of you? So beyond the entree, you can manage that through different levels of sweetness in the wines. But when you switch gears to dessert, there's no dry red.
That's right. Yeah. Sweet wine, sweet desserts and dry reds are just polar opposites.
Yeah.
They're not even married. They got divorced before they even got married kind of situation. So they're not on the same page. They will not date. It'll make the wine really bitter, really, really tannic, and it'll make the dessert just almost too sweet.
Interesting.
Too sweet. So now, like myself, my wife, we do a lot of liquid dessert as our last course.
I couldn't agree more.
And so sometimes I don't want a dessert,
a food,
but I will drink any kind of Sauterne or Madeira as my dessert because it hits that sweet note that I want to finish my meal with and to kind of top off my palate. But again, it's liquid. It has so much more complexity to it sometimes than some just straight, desserts may have. But I love all the acids that are coming on this wine. So yeah, sweet was sweet. So, but also do like, sweeter wines with acidic foods as well. on the savory side. But dessert wines and dessert last course is probably one of the best pairings you can ever have in a meal.
So I think what you've just shared, I'm thinking going back to the very beginning when we were talking about, sweet wines that a lot of people start with and some people continue with because that's their flavor profile. And I'm not here, and I know you're not here to say you shouldn't drink any style of wine. If you love it, drink it. So, but things that are more on the sweeter side that a lot of us use as our kind of our entry wines because it mirrors the sweetness we may have like in our sodas or in other like cocktails that we drink that have simple syrups and other sweetness. And it's a nice transition. But when it comes to going full on then into what we call a true dessert wine, there are sweet wines, there are off-dry wines, there are dessert wines. And how do you educate somebody on really what those differences are? Because I mean, a true dessert wine has a lot of different, one, the way it's made, two, the intent and purpose of what it should be paired with and how it should be consumed. They're vastly different. But at the same point in time, we're still talking about sugar.
Answer is simple. Buy a wine, try it.
Of that.
I mean, you don't know what a strawberry tastes like until you try a strawberry. Okay. So you can describe it, the flavor of strawberry all day long until you have a strawberry. So we can't have really good dessert wines until you try some dessert wines. And dessert wines are actually also really good value wines. And here's why I tell people, because one, you can go to your local retailer and buy across the board from a white sticky wine to a port, to a non-fortified dessert wine, all kinds of styles. And you're not going to break the bank, even buying like 4 or 5 different kinds of styles. You can get all those probably for under $100, all 5 wines, and try them. Here's the best thing about them too, is you get to pop these wines and they will last in your refrigerator for usually up to 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even longer, depending on what it is.
Yeah.
So because and these bottles also we're buying, they're we call them half bottles. They're 375 milliliters, which is half of a normal size bottle, right? And you're only drinking anywhere from 1.5 ounces to 2.5 ounces of these wines versus a normal bottle of wine. You're drinking 4 to
10.
Yeah, but up to the bottle, right? So you can buy a nice dessert wine and drink it over weeks or a month, right? And because you're only having a little taste of it at the end of your meal. So that's the best way to learn. People are like, well, I just really don't love ports. Okay, well, that's fine. Then you're finding your wheelhouse of what you like. But I like sauternes. I like that more of that honey and apricot, kind of profile. Okay, then great. But I like more of the fig notes. I like more of fig and raisins and nuts. Okay, then let's go to port and Madeiras, right? Are you a chocolate lover? Or are you a fruit lover at dessert, right? So it goes the same way dessert wines.
No, that's a really great point because I think one of the misnomers that I catch is that people think sweet wine. When you talk about sweetness in wine, people want to lump it all into the same category of some of those early wines that we might have consumed that are really low alcohol, really high sugar, and they have a complete purpose in the world. But you can't really put a white Zinfandel in the same bucket as a Baron Trochanopsis Riesling.
Correct.
And again, don't mean to get fancy on words. All that really means is it's a super late harvested Riesling grape that is almost dried when it's picked off the vines. So how do you educate somebody on the differences without trying to get into a master sommelier level?
I like to call more dessert and fortified wines.
Yeah.
I just think the word sweet, it means kind of only one thing. We think candy and sugar and kind of sweet.
Fair enough.
Here. Will you get some of those notes on the wine? Yes, but you also get 25 other notes besides when you say sweet. But dessert wines cover the gamut. Fortified wines, the wines we consumed younger were not, they didn't care about thinking through that whole entire process, which created the headaches, in the mornings. But these wines are intense, like very intense and complex in flavor and profile. But again, a little bit goes a long way. Hence, same thing as dessert as on the table. You're not eating a whole pie. You're eating a slice of pie. You're not drinking a whole bottle of Sauternes. You're having a glass of Sauternes. So a little bit goes a long way just to really have that finish on the back end.
So if I could try to dissect that in simple terms, sweet wines you can almost put into 2 buckets. One, it's intentionally sweet from just a point of having a wine that's sweet. It's simple. There's nothing really complex about it. And I'm talking about things on the, just kind of those entry wines, which again, nothing wrong with it, but Moscatos, White Zinfandels, that sort of thing. Dessert wines on the other end of the spectrum are deliberately made, whether it's because they were harvested late, they have a fortification process to stop the fermentation, to keep that sugar level, but it is an intentional winemaking style in order to create that dessert wine that does have a lot of sugar remaining.
We're letting the wine do the work for us versus the person behind the process do all the work. I'm not taking the job of the winemaker. The last process you just talked about was all the grapes did all the work for us. They naturally let the water evaporate out because it hung on the vine longer, or it dried on mats.
However you want to get
it. And so that water is evaporating out it. So we have more concentration of pure fruit and sugar in that grape versus having to add in a sugar or a kind of fruit into a wine.
Let's pause for a quick break. We'll be right back. Imagine you have a reservation tonight at the hot new local restaurant. You get there, you're meeting your friends, you sit down, the menu looks amazing. You know exactly what you're ordering to eat. However, you flip the menu over and start looking at the wine list. You don't recognize a single wine, and you have no idea what to order. If this sounds like an experience that you frequently have, you are in luck. Menu Match by WineWise was created exactly for wine lovers like you, because the number one question I get as a wine educator is not, what are the nuances of malolactic fermentation? Or how do you understand the difference between American oak and French oak? It's, how do I know what wine is going to pair with my meal tonight? I would love for you to be part of the beta test to provide real feedback so I can help you make Menu Match the perfect AI sommelier tool to take with you to dinner at any restaurant, anytime, to help you pick the perfect wine. Let WineWise transform your wine journey. That visualization is so key, because if you think about it, as you're listening to this podcast, if you go to your grocery store and you take a bunch of grapes, whether it's green grapes, red grapes, purple grapes, black grapes, doesn't matter. They're juicy, they're plump. There's a lot of water content in them. And if you press that content out, you're going to get a tablespoon or so of liquid. Go to a different aisle and grab some raisins and do the same pressing function, and you might maybe get like a tiny little dribble of liquid out of it. And again, so that's what we're talking about is just the difference in the condition of that grape when the winemaker is attempting to make a wine out of it.
Right.
That's a great visualization. Okay, perfect. So then let's go back to dessert wines. And if you're having a conversation with someone in your restaurant who is ordering your best-selling dessert, and it's a magical dessert, and you know that the whatever they were drinking during dinner is not going to be a good pairing. Let's talk now about the different styles of true dessert wines, and tell me what your top 3 selling dessert wines might be, so that our listener can understand that not all dessert wines are made the same, not all taste the same, and it's not just about the sugar.
Yeah, so the 3 it's a great question. The 3 that we kind of sell here the most, and I would think restaurants in general, our retail stores sell the most of. First, probably be a port wine.
Okay, port, yep.
Okay. Second would probably be a white dessert wine out of France, would be a Sauterne, or a Sauterne-like style wine.
Like a Bon de Venise or something.
Right, and we have a lot of great white wines, also dessert wines coming out of the United States as well.
Right.
Either made in, we'll try to style, or we even have like the ice wines, so you get into Finger Lakes and things like that. And then the last one we sell is a Madeira, which is my personal favorite because it has a lot of great sweetness to it, but it has a lot of savory characteristics to it as well. And so to your question is here at Ellerby, we're kind of known for our bread pudding, and it's my mom's bread pudding. Not your necessarily traditional style bread pudding, so it is sweet. throws off a lot of cinnamon. We don't have any nuts in it, but it has a natural nuttiness to it of all the nutmeg and things that are going into that. It has cream, it has whiskey sauce and all that kind of stuff, and brioche. Okay. So you have a lot of sweet, but we're throwing a lot of things in the kitchen in there of components as well. I love Madeira because Madeira has a sweetness to it as well, but it has a big time nuttiness behind it. So it pairs really well. That nuttiness, which may not necessarily be in the bread pudding, elevates that bread pudding just a little bit of more of nuttiness in that bread pudding that didn't have, but it's perceived that it has because of the pairing. And that whiskey sauce is pretty sweet. So a lot of people say, we'll do a Sauternes. Sauternes could go great, but actually that whiskey sauce is so sweet. I want to bring that whiskey sauce down in the sweetness a little bit. That's why I got my Madeira, because Madeira still has really a lot of acid in it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of my favorite pairings, but also I'm a junkie for Madeiras as well.
Well, you brought up acid, and we talked about that extensively in the last episode. And I think that's one of the things that people aren't aware of, which makes for the best dessert wines, is having that high acidity to balance that sweetness. If it's just all a sugar bomb, it can taste like alcoholic cotton candy, which I'm sure somebody's making somewhere, but it doesn't necessarily sound great. But if you add that acidity on the back end, it really does tame down the sugar. So it's still sweet, but it's not cloying. And then that acidity gives it that brightness and that lift that it needs.
Yeah. So, I mean, like on our previous example of podcast, we talked about, let's talk with Sauv Blanc as being one of the very highly acidic varietals. Well, Sauv Blanc and Semillon are the two most widely used white varietals in a dessert wine. Yeah. For that reason. Yeah. Is because they throw off so much acid, but they also can make a really great fortified dessert wine as well, because of that balance. Keep talking about balance, and that balance of having it either hang on the vine longer for the botrytis to set in or an ice harvest to set in, but where that the acid is really becoming really intense in it, but so is the sugar. But guess what we don't have anymore? We don't have that water, right? It's gone. It's minuscule, right? Yeah. And so we have this really acidic varietal throw it now. We never think Sauv Blanc as a sweet wine. No. But now that sugar is now all held in that little berry, right? And so we have all this sugar, a little bit of pulp, a little bit of wine, a little bit of water, but all that acid is with everything else is naturally happening. And so now you have this beautiful balance of how it's going to work out together. That's why I love the white. I love the reds too, but that white, those white wines that really high acid work so great and just naturally. Like I said, Mother Nature she is doing her job. She's like, hey, I'm giving you the perfect berry. Mr. and Mrs. Winemaker, you take it. And then that's where they get to take and make it their own kind of dessert wine.
If somebody just in general says, I don't like sweet wines, so I'm not going to like dessert wines, how do you make that transition? What would that bridge look like? And I love the fact that most dessert wines, you're not talking about a 5 to 10 ounce pour like we talked about. You're really talking about an ounce or two. It's a sipping.
These are sipping wines. Yeah. And again, okay, let's put it in a different perspective. I'm bringing whiskey into play. So if you're going to have a nice whiskey, you're right. You're not going to drink 3 ounces or 2.5 ounces of whiskey just like this, just go down the hatch. Because it's so intense, right? There's so much going on. Well, one, there's a lot of alcohol going on the whiskey, which we do have definitely higher alcohol going on in dessert wines. So we're looking from a still wine anywhere from being 11 up to like 14.5%. Well, dessert wines, we're looking at from usually around 16 up to around 20%.
That's a great point.
Big change in alcohol on that side. So one, we want that alcohol to, we want to be able to taste the product, the beverage, and not just alcohol. So we don't just down the hatch. We sip on this wine to get and we hold it in our mouth for a little bit. And so dessert wines, the same thing. Is like, you're right, 2.5 ounces for a purpose. A little goes a long way, if you will. And that's just because there's, like I said, high alcohol, high sugar, high fruit. You don't need a lot of it.
The dessert wine in itself can be the dessert, which I love.
Yes, which is the majority of the time for us. Listen, I love great desserts, but dessert wines are just, I don't know. And usually they have stories behind them. I go back to Madeiras, is that like, you can have old Madeiras that may be expensive out of the gate, right? So let's say you want to spend $100 or above on a bottle of Madeira that's 30 years old. Well, you got a history in a bottle that, let's say it's $100 for a 19, let's call it 80 Madeira, 85 Madeira, or port, right? But you're getting a lot of history in the bottle that you could open up and you can still consume that Madeira over the next year. Yeah. Right. And so you can like, I don't want to spend $100 or $300, $500. Well, that's a lot of money. I get it. But you can have a little bit over a year. And now you're going to talk about that. You're going to share it with everybody. Every time they come to their home, to have a really cool wine that may be expensive in the beginning, but you're just taking you a year to go through that. And so I tell people, like, listen, you're buying a $100 bottle of tequila. It's really nice tequila. You're drinking it over a year, right? We're hoping you are.
In theory.
But it's the same thing that comes with these dessert wines, is you can spend this money on run that dessert wine and then slowly just enjoy it over time. Versus when we open a bottle of Cabernet or Chardonnay, we got to consume that within 1 to 3 days. That's all the wines are really going to hold up to. Not dessert, because again, it's a natural preservative. Natural preservative is sugar and alcohol. Alcohol. I'm sorry, and acid. So you have something that's going to age forever.
When you think of investing in a good dessert wine, it's like investing in a good spirit, bottle of spirits.
But you don't have to. But again, if you're testing the waters, don't go out and say, "Hey, give me $100 bottle of a dessert wine." No, don't do that. Start off to figure out what kind of dessert wines you like first, and then work your way through it, right? And so, just like anything, you're not going to go off and buy the most expensive thing off the bat. Find out what you like first. They're all different styles in different regions.
Taking everything we've talked about and in principle from a food and wine pairing, classic traditional, I'll call it a rule or guideline. Let's talk about guidelines instead of rules. You want your dessert wine, your wine to be sweeter than the food you're pairing it with. Why is that? And then why would you not put that same dessert wine maybe with a steak or fish and chips? Right. What's happening?
Yeah, so that's that's kind of rule 101 is pairing dessert wines with dessert courses, is that you want the sweetness level to be the same, or the dessert wine to be a hair sweeter than the dessert. One, because on the last episode we were kind of showing how red wines did with chocolate, and then we did the Sauterne, right? And so that chocolate had, which was like about 60% cacao, it was still pretty bitter, but not super sweet. But that Sauterne was a little bit sweeter than that chocolate was. Well, it actually made the chocolate kind of go away. Remember that, right? Yeah. The other notes of the chocolate go away, but made that dessert wine really, that fruit that you said, apricot. Just all of a sudden, the apricot went boom. It was kind of just lifted, right? And I was thinking that was the sugar that was in that chocolate, and that little back end of that chocolate was pushing forward all those really great fruit notes. Yeah. On that side. So I like to go a little bit sweeter. You don't want to necessarily go sweet wines with dry acidic foods, like a steak could be. We don't think a steak is being dry, but it really kind of is, because all the fat that's in there. It's a dry protein. It needs tannins and it needs things like that. It doesn't need sugar. Right. And so when you have a steak and dessert wine, traditionally, by the way, we're talking about steak, because I've had a blue cheese crusted steak with Béarnaise sauce with a Sauterne, and it was delicious. I was going to say, that sounds very good. But again, we're going outside the box of cooking, and you're looking at the sauce pairing, right? Not the protein. Exactly. Yeah. So if we're just it's a good old grilled, ribeye with salt, pepper on, and olive oil. The Sauterne will not do it justice. The Sauterne will go away. The steak will okay, the steak's not bad, but the Sauterne, you wasted your time on your Sauterne. In general, dessert and the sweet wine need to be at least the same sweetness, for the wine a little bit more. And sometimes even with varietals like, let's say, Riesling, labeling on Riesling could be tricky. And you may think you're getting a dry Riesling when it's actually an off-dry Riesling. And you try that with something that needs to pair with a very dry wine, and you end up getting a mismatch simply because you weren't expecting that sugar level in that off-dry Riesling. I think those are some things to be aware of. But dessert wines, I think, have these kind of misnomers, and I think we need to move past that. And so I really encourage everyone, like you said, just go try it. Go get a couple of bottles. Don't spend a lot of money, but just try them. But try them with the right dishes. Well, and you brought up also, I guess I was kind of going down pigeonholing of saying dessert wines. Back to the sweet wine example is Rieslings, right? Yeah. And so off-dry Riesling, there's going to be some natural sweetness into that wine that's coming, again, that varietal has high acid, high sugar already. And we do see dessert wines made out of Riesling, but we see a lot of still wines made out of Riesling. Yeah. And some of the best wines in the world are Rieslings, right, that we love. Again, go back to a non-dessert dish. In Texas, we eat a lot of Mexican food here. Our family enjoys a lot of Asian flavors. And so we have a lot of spice that's going on in some of our cuisine here in our state, or other cuisines as well. And sweeter wines, like a off-dry Riesling, really pulls or tames or calms that heat down. And it makes those dishes just more epic and more mind-blowing,
To me, there is nothing better than an off-dry Riesling or an off-dry Gewürztraminer with a spicy curry.
Amen. I'm with you.
The key thing that I'd love our listeners, Richard, to walk away with is that sweet wines aren't necessarily our starter wines that we talked about. And again, if you love a Moscato, there's some great Moscatos out there. We're not poo-pooing that at all. We're not telling you don't drink that white Zinfandel. But what we really are talking about are these like epic styles of true dessert wines that are made in unique ways that we can get into on other episodes because it's pretty cool, but they are specifically designed for pairing either as your dessert itself or with desserts or even cheese courses that really bring out the nuances. Dessert wines are not about the sugar. It's about the complexity. It's about the winemaking styles. It's about the history. It's about the story. It's about the longevity of these wines. And that's something completely different than just focusing on sugar and wine.
And get outside your box. If you're going to be ordering in, some food and you're going to be ordering some Mexican or Asian food, you can do dessert wine with it, actually, during a course. Like dessert wines only have to go with dessert. And the dessert wine can go with, some great food as a savory dish. But also, I like your Riesling's example of get some Rieslings is also like, well, I don't really love Rieslings. Well, I promise you, Rieslings need food. And food needs Riesling. Yes. So we're sticking with Riesling. There's other, Grüner Veltliners, Gewürztraminers, things like that too. But things like that is like go to your shop and grab a couple of those wines, and maybe by themselves are a little bit sweet, like gosh, a little bit sweet, but also when you have it with that dish, like that sweetness goes away. Now you taste the wine and you taste the dish too.
I think we need to do a whole episode on Riesling alone.
I love it. We can.
Well, Richard, I think we have covered so much ground with dessert wines, and again, the message is get out and try some. You won't love all of them. And we're not saying you should love all of them, but I guarantee you, if you try enough of them and pair them with the right things or just have them by themselves, you are going to find a dessert wine that you're going to fall in love with. And that's what this is all about. All right.
Buy and try.
Buy and try. All right. Well, perfect. Well, cheers. I hope the next time you finish a meal, you will order dessert and a dessert wine and explore the magical pairing that it can truly be. If you know other sweet tooths other than yourself, share this episode with them. Click pause, go to your favorite podcast platform, copy this link, and text it to them right now. They will thank you for doing so. To continue your wine journey, follow me on my Instagram at Kristi Everyday Sommelier, Kristi Everyday Sommelier. And in our next episode, we're going back on the road, but with a whole new twist to learn how wine can be that magical connector if you're traveling solo or even dining out by yourself. So until then, cheers, my friend, to learning wine your way.